The transport ship Endeavour cut through space like a silver needle, carrying its cargo of nervous graduate students toward what could be their final exam. The cramped briefing room buzzed with tension as 5 young beings from across the galaxy stared at their mission files. Captain Rodriguez had delivered the bad news an hour ago. The mining colony on Titan 7 was in serious trouble. Workers were disappearing. Equipment worth millions of credits was being torn apart like paper toys. Production had stopped completely. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain had said, his weathered face grim, "you're not going to like this one." Now, as the ship hummed through hyperspace, the 5 students tried to process what they were facing. Crick spread his blue-scale hands across the holographic display, his reptilian eyes scanning the data. As team leader, the Zentran took his responsibilities seriously. His species was known for careful planning and logical thinking. Listen up, everyone. Target designation: Shadow Maw. Height: 12 feet minimum. Weight: approximately 800 pounds. Abilities include adaptive camouflage that makes it nearly invisible, razor-sharp claws that can cut through titanium, and intelligence level suggesting pack-hunting behavior. Vex clicked her mandibles nervously, her insect-like features twitching as she cleaned her plasma rifles for the 3rd time that hour. The Manthari had excellent reflexes and deadly accuracy, but even she looked worried. The mining reports say it moves faster than their security cameras can track. 3 guards tried to corner one last week. They found pieces of their equipment scattered over half a mile. Gorth grunted from his corner, his rock-like skin making scraping sounds as he checked his explosive charges. The Corvin was built like a walking mountain, and his people were famous for their straightforward approach to problems. If something caused trouble, you blew it up. Simple. Standard elimination protocol sounds right to me, he rumbled in his deep voice. Plant charges around its territory. Drive it into the kill zone. Problem solved. Zane flickered slightly as emotion affected a control over his physical form. The whisper could phase between solid matter and energy, making him perfect for reconnaissance work. His voice came out like wind through leaves. The colonists are terrified. I can sense their fear even from this distance. Whatever this creature is, it has them completely spooked. Then there was Beth. While her teammates discussed weapons and tactics, the human sat cross-legged on her bunk, methodically packing what looked like camping supplies. Her backpack was filled with energy bars, a sleeping bag, basic medical supplies, and what appeared to be dog treats. Her teammates had stopped their planning to stare at her preparations. "Beth," Crick said slowly, his forked tongue flicking out as he tried to understand human logic. "You are aware that we're being sent to eliminate a massive apex predator, correct? This isn't a nature documentary expedition." Beth looked up from organizing her gear. At 24, she was the youngest member of their team, with brown hair always tied back in a practical ponytail and clothes that looked more suitable for hiking than fighting monsters. She had joined the xenobiology program specifically to study dangerous creatures, though her methods often confused her professors. "I heard the briefing same as you," she replied calmly, continuing to pack. 12 feet tall, adaptive camouflage, razor claws. Sounds fascinating. Vex's compound eyes focused on the small packages Beth was tucking into her backpack. "Are those treats? The kind you give to domestic animals?" "Emergency rations," Beth said with a straight face. "You never know what might come in handy." The alien students exchanged glances. Humans had joined Galactic Society only 50 years ago, but they had already built a reputation for doing the impossible through completely illogical methods. While other species developed better weapons and stronger armor, humans seemed to solve problems by befriending them. "Beth," Zane said carefully, his form solidifying as he tried to focus. The Academy records show that in the past year alone, 3 different human students have turned combat missions into pet acquisition expeditions. There was that incident with the Void Sharks, the Shadow Wolves, and whatever happened on Kepler Station that they're still classifying. Beth zipped up her backpack and stood, slinging it over her shoulders. Different situations, different solutions. Sometimes the best way to handle a dangerous predator is to understand why it's being dangerous in the first place. Crix's tail lashed with frustration. It's attacking miners and destroying property. The reason is irrelevant. Our mission parameters are clear. Sure, Beth agreed easily. Standard elimination protocol. I understand perfectly. But as she walked toward her quarters to get some rest before planetfall, her teammates noticed she was humming softly under her breath. It sounded almost like a lullaby. Outside, the ship's windows tightened. Seven grew larger against the star field, its surface scarred by mining operations. Somewhere down there, a creature waited in the darkness, completely unaware that its life was about to change forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across Titan 7's rocky surface as the 5 students prepared for their mission. The mining colony sprawled before them like a metal scar on the planet's face, with massive extraction equipment sitting silent and abandoned. Crix had everything planned out with military precision. His blue scales gleamed as he directed the setup of their base camp 2 miles from the reported Shadow Maw sightings. Vex, I want motion sensors every 50 meters along the perimeter. Gorth, place explosive charges at these coordinates. Zane, scout the area but maintain safe distance. The team moved with practiced efficiency. Vex's plasma rifles hummed as she calibrated the targeting systems. Gorth's explosives were planted with the careful precision of someone who understood exactly how much force it took to bring down a 12-foot predator. Zane flickered in and out of solid form as he mapped the terrain from above. Beth watched all this preparation while adjusting the straps on her simple backpack. No weapons, no armor, just camping gear and her grandfather's old silver whistle that had once called sheepdogs across the hills of Montana. Beth, you're assigned a rear guard position, Crix announced, consulting his tactical display. Stay behind our defensive line and document whatever we encounter. Actually, Beth said quietly, I think I'll take a different approach. Before anyone could stop her, she was walking away from their high-tech fortress, heading straight toward the crystal caves where the Shadow Maw had been spotted. Her teammates watched in horror as the small human figure disappeared into a maze of rocky outcroppings. Is she insane? Vex chittered, her compound eyes tracking Beth's movement. She's walking directly into hostile territory with no protection. Crix was already reaching for his comm unit. Beth, return to base immediately. This is not part of the mission plan. But Beth's comm had somehow developed a convenient malfunction. The crystal caves were beautiful in a deadly sort of way. Millions of years ago, volcanic activity had created these natural tunnels, and now they sparkled with mineral deposits that caught and reflected light in rainbow patterns. Beth moved carefully through the passages, following scratches on the walls that could only have been made by claws the size of kitchen knives. Her footsteps echoed softly in the silence. Most people would have been terrified, but Beth felt oddly calm. She had spent her childhood exploring caves in Kentucky with her grandfather, learning to read the signs that animals left behind. The scratches told a story of desperation, not aggression. They were too random, too frantic. The smell hit her first, not the metallic scent of a predator's hunting ground, but something else. Sickness, fear, grief. She found them in a large cavern where crystals grew from floor to ceiling like a frozen forest. 3 small shapes huddled against the far wall, barely moving. Cubs, maybe 3 months old, with soft gray fur that should have been thick and glossy, but was instead matted and thin from malnutrition. And next to them, the bones. Beth didn't need a xenobiology degree to understand what she was looking at. The skeleton was adult, female, and it had been crushed by something heavy and mechanical. Mining equipment. The mother had probably been foraging near the colony when she encountered one of the massive excavators. A low growl echoed through the cavern. Beth turned slowly, her hands visible and empty. The Shadow Maw emerged from the deeper shadows like a living nightmare. 12 feet of muscle and claws, with fur that seemed to absorb light. Its eyes glowed amber in the crystal light, and its lips pulled back to reveal teeth that could snap a person in half without effort. But Beth had learned to look beyond the scary parts. She saw the way the creature moved, favoring its left side where old wounds hadn't healed properly. She saw how thin it was, ribs showing through its dark fur. Most importantly, she saw how it positioned itself between her and the cubs. "Hey there, big guy," she whispered, slowly lowering herself to sit cross-legged on the cave floor. Her movements were deliberate and non-threatening. You've been having a rough time, haven't you? The shadow maw snarled, but there was no real aggression in it, just exhaustion and desperation. The creature had been trying to hunt enough food for 3 growing cubs while protecting them from what it saw as invaders in its territory. Beth reached into her backpack and pulled out energy bars. The smell of protein and fat filled the cave, and she saw the shadow maw's nostrils flare. When had it last eaten? I bet you're just trying to take care of your babies, she said softly, placing the food on the ground between them. Lost your mate, and now you're doing everything alone. That's got to be terrifying. Her calm crackled to life. Beth, what's your status? We're reading massive life signs converging on your position. Are you under attack? The shadow maw tensed at the sudden noise, but Beth's calm voice seemed to settle it. All good here, she replied, watching as a massive creature took a cautious step toward the food, just making some new friends. Through her earpiece, she could hear Crix practically hyperventilating, but Beth was focused on the miracle happening in front of her. The apex predator was sniffing the energy bars, then looking back at its cubs, then at her face, making a decision. Trust was always a choice. Day 1 started with Beth setting up a simple camp just outside the Crystal Cave entrance. She pitched her grandfather's old camping tent between 2 large boulders, giving her shelter while staying visible to the Shadow Maw family inside. The massive father watched her every move from the shadows, amber eyes glowing like warning lights. Back at the base camp, her teammates monitored the situation through long-range sensors and Beth's vital signs on their scanners. Crix paced back and forth across their command center, his blue scales darkening with stress. Her heart rate is completely normal, Vex reported, her compound eyes focused on the readouts. How is she not terrified? She's camping next to a creature that could tear her apart without breaking a sweat. Maybe the fear will hit her when reality sets in, Gord suggested, though his rocky features showed doubt. Humans sometimes have delayed reactions to dangerous situations. But Beth wasn't afraid. She had grown up around animals that others considered dangerous. Her grandfather had taught her that most aggressive behavior came from fear or need, not genuine malice. As the sun set over Titan VII's rocky landscape, she made herself a simple dinner on her portable camp stove, the smell of heated rations drifting into the cave. The shadow maw appeared at the cave entrance, massive and intimidating, but Beth noticed something others might have missed. The creature's ears weren't flat against its head in true aggression. Instead, they swiveled constantly, listening for threats while keeping part of its attention on her. Hungry, aren't you? She said quietly, spooning half her meal into a spare container and setting on the ground halfway between them. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. The creature approached cautiously, sniffed the food, then retreated with the container. Beth heard small whimpers from deep in the cave where the cubs were waiting. Their father was sharing every bite with his children first. Day 2 brought the real breakthrough. Beth woke to find the empty food container sitting just outside her tent, clean completely. More importantly, the shadow maw was lying at the cave entrance, watching her with something that wasn't quite hostility anymore. Morning, big guy, she greeted him, pulling on her boots. How are the little ones doing? The creature that others called a monster tilted its massive head slightly, as if considering her words. Beth had started calling him Atlas after seeing how much weight he carried on his shoulders, caring for 3 cubs alone. She spent the morning observing the family from a respectful distance. The cubs were sicker than she'd first realized. One had an infected scratch across its shoulder. Another showed signs of dehydration. The third was so weak it barely moved. When Atlas left the hunt, Beth made her move. She approached the cubs slowly, her basic medical supplies in hand. They hissed and tried to hide, but they were too weak to run. Beth worked quickly but gently, cleaning wounds and offering water mixed with electrolyte powder. Atlas returned to find her sitting beside his children, and for a moment, Beth thought she had pushed too far. The massive creature's lips pulled back, revealing teeth like white daggers. But then he saw his cubs drinking eagerly from the water she offered, and something changed in his amber eyes. They needed help, Beth explained simply. I couldn't just watch them suffer. Back at base camp, her teammates watched their scanners in amazement. She's sleeping, Zane whispered, his ethereal form flickering with disbelief. The human is actually sleeping while that thing stands guard over her tent. This violates everything we know about predator behavior. Vex chittered nervously. Shadow maws are solitary hunters. They don't form bonds outside their immediate family groups. Humans don't follow normal rules, Gorth rumbled, his rocky voice thoughtful. Remember the stories from the academy? There was that human student who somehow convinced a pack of void wolves to help with search and rescue operations, and the one who turned a space whale into a cargo transport. The professors still can't explain how they do it. Day 3 brought crisis and resolution. Beth woke to frantic sounds from deep in the cave. A section of the crystal ceiling had collapsed during the night, trapping one of the cubs behind a wall of fallen rock. Atlas was clawing desperately at the stones, but his massive size worked against him in the narrow space. Beth grabbed her pack and crawled into the cave. "Easy, Atlas," she said, using the name she'd given him. "Let me help." Working together, they moved the fallen crystals piece by piece. Atlas used his strength to shift the larger rocks, while Beth crawled into spaces too small for him, freeing the trapped cub. When they finally pulled the little one to safety, both human and shadow maw were exhausted and covered in crystal dust. The cub was scared but uninjured. As Beth checked him over, Atlas did something that would have seemed impossible to the watching aliens. He gently nuzzled her shoulder with his massive head, a gesture of gratitude that crossed all species barriers. By the end of the week, the cubs were healthy and playful, following Beth around the cave system like oversized puppies. Atlas had begun bringing her gifts, small crystals and interesting rocks that showed acceptance of her as part of his family group. The impossible had become routine. A human had joined a shadow maw pack, not through dominance or fear, but through simple kindness and understanding. The transport ship Endeavor approached Titan Station's main docking bay like any other routine return from a student mission. The traffic control operators were expecting 5 tired graduate students with either mission reports or body bags. They definitely weren't expecting what came next. The first sign something was wrong came from the ship's manifest update. Instead of 5 outbound passengers, the system now showed 9 incoming life forms. Large ones. "Control to Endeavor," the station operator called over the comm. "We're showing discrepancies in your passenger count. Please explain additional life signs aboard your vessel." Beth's voice came back calm and cheerful. "Oh, that's just Atlas and the kids. Don't worry, they're very well behaved." In the control tower, operators exchanged confused glances. Kids? The mission had been to eliminate a dangerous predator, not rescue children. The ship touched down with its usual mechanical precision. Standard docking procedures call for a quick decontamination scan, passenger manifest check, and release to the main terminal. Instead, the automated sensors immediately began screaming warnings. "Alert! Dangerous life forms detected. Initiating lockdown protocol." Emergency lights bathed the docking bay in red as blast doors slammed shut. Security teams scrambled to positions around the landing pad, weapons charged and ready. Through reinforced windows, dozens of station personnel watched the ship's boarding ram begin to lower. What they saw next would be talked about in academy circles for years to come. Beth walked down the ramp first, looking tired but satisfied after her week in the caves. Her camping gear was slung over one shoulder, and she had dirt under her fingernails and crystal dust in her hair. Behind her, moving with surprising grace for their size, came 4 shadow maws. The adult male was massive, exactly as terrifying as the mission briefings had described. 12 feet of pure predator, with claws that gleamed like polished metal and amber eyes that seemed to glow in the artificial light. But instead of stalking or prowling, he walked calmly beside Beth like a well-trained dog. The 3 cubs bounded ahead playfully, tumbling over each other in a way that young animals do everywhere in the galaxy. They looked healthy now, their fur thick and glossy, their eyes bright with curiosity as they explored their new surroundings. In the observation deck, Admiral Thompson felt his heart skip several beats. As the station's commanding officer, he had seen combat in 3 different wars and faced down pirates, rebels, and natural disasters. Nothing had prepared him for watching a human college student take an evening stroll with a family of apex predators. All units, weapons hot, He commanded into his communicator, "Do not engage unless the human is in immediate danger." But Beth was clearly in no danger at all. She paused at the bottom of the ramp to scratch Atlas behind the ears, and the massive creature rumbled with contentment like an oversized cat. The sound was so deep it vibrated through the station's hull. "Stand down," Admiral Thompson commanded, his voice echoing through the docking bay speakers. "Nobody shoots unless I give the order." He activated the external communication system. "Miss Chun, can you explain what exactly is happening down there?" Beth looked up at the observation windows, where she could see dozens of faces pressed against the reinforced glass. "His name is Atlas, not Rex," she called back. "And he's not a monster. He's a single father who needed help." She gestured to the cubs, who were now investigating the various pieces of equipment scattered around the docking bay with typical youngster curiosity. The mining equipment killed their mother. Atlas was just trying to protect his children and find enough food for them to survive. When you're desperate and scared, sometimes you lash out at anything you see as a threat. Admiral Thompson felt his understanding of xenobiology shift fundamentally. "You're telling me that all the attacks on the mining colony were just a grieving parent trying to feed his kids," Beth finished. "He never meant to hurt anyone. He was just scared and alone." Professor Martinez, the xenobiology department head, pushed through the crowd in the observation deck. His dark eyes were fixed on the tablet Beth held up, displaying weeks' worth of behavioral data, feeding patterns, and social interaction studies. "Remarkable," he breathed, scanning through the information. "Complete dietary analysis, communication patterns, family structure documentation, emotional range studies." He looked up at his colleagues. "This data would have taken us decades to gather through traditional observation methods." Dr. Kim from the Alien Psychology Department leaned over his shoulder. "Is that a recording of them actually communicating? You documented their language." "Atlas has been teaching me basic shadow maw," Beth explained, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "They're incredibly intelligent. The cubs are already bilingual." Professor Martinez scrolled through more data, shaking his head in amazement. "Though I should note," he said to the gathered faculty, "this is the 4th time this semester a human student has returned from a dangerous creature elimination mission with a new companion instead." "The Void Whale incident," Dr. Kim nodded. "The Shadow Wolf Pack adoption," added Professor Chun. "And whatever happened on Kepler Station that they're still classifying," Admiral Thompson said grimly. Down in the docking bay, one of the cubs had discovered a maintenance cart and was trying to figure out how the wheels worked. Beth laughed and gently guided the youngster away from the equipment, while Atlas watched with what could only be described as parental amusement. "Security sweep complete," the lead guard reported. "No weapons detected. No hostile behavior. They seem completely focused on the human." "Of course they are," Professor Martinez muttered, still reviewing Beth's data. "She's become part of their family unit. Look at these social bonding indicators." Admiral Thompson watched the impossible scene below and wondered, not for the first time, how humans had managed to survive long enough to reach the stars when their first instinct was apparently to adopt everything that tried to kill them. 6 months after Beth's return to the Academy, Titan VII had become the safest mining operation in the entire galaxy. The monthly security reports made for fascinating reading, especially the part that said 0 incidents in bold letters across every page. Colony Administrator Johnson couldn't believe the transformation. Where once they had massive equipment destroyed weekly and workers too terrified to venture outside the main compound, now they had the most efficient and secure facility in 3 star systems. The secret wasn't better weapons or stronger barriers. It was 4 Shadow Maws who had appointed themselves as the unofficial security force. Atlas patrolled the perimeter each morning, his keen senses detecting problems long before human equipment could. The 3 cubs, now adolescent Shadow Maws, standing nearly 8 feet tall, worked in shifts covering different sections of the mining operation. They had learned to recognize authorized personnel by scent and could spot equipment malfunctions from miles away. Atlas found another unstable tunnel support in Section 7, reported Chief Engineer Williams during the morning briefing. He led our repair crew directly to the problem area. That's the 3rd potential cave-in he's prevented this month. The most amazing part was watching them interact with the human workers. The Shadow Maws had learned to respond to basic voice commands in Standard Galactic, while the mining crew had picked up enough Shadow Maw vocalizations to communicate simple concepts. When Supervisor Martinez called out danger, stay back, in the low rumbling tones Beth had taught them, all 4 Shadow Maws immediately understood and moved to safe positions. Back at the academy, Beth was defending her graduate thesis to a packed auditorium. Word had spread across campus about the human student who had somehow documented a complete behavioral analysis of one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators. Students from 12 different species crowded into the lecture hall, with overflow seating set up in 3 additional rooms. Packed bonding across species, a human perspective, had already been downloaded over 2 million times from the Academy's research database. Universities across known space were adding it to their required reading lists, not just for xenobiology programs, but for diplomatic studies, interspecies psychology, and even military strategy courses. Professor Martinez sat at the head of the examination committee, still amazed by the wealth of data Beth had gathered. Her documentation included detailed dietary requirements, social hierarchies, communication patterns, emotional responses, and even recreational behaviors. Information that traditional research methods might never have uncovered. The candidate will now face questions from the examination board, Professor Martinez announced. Dr. Kelfin, a crystalline being from the Andorian system, was first to speak. His translated voice came out sharp and analytical. Miss Chun, your research contradicts centuries of established xenobiology. Shadow Maws are classified as non-social apex predators incapable of forming bonds outside their immediate genetic family. How do you account for these discrepancies? Beth stood calmly next to her presentation display, which showed video footage of Atlas teaching human security guards how to track dangerous animals by scent. I think the classification was wrong, she said simply. Just because something hasn't been observed doesn't mean it's impossible. Shadow Maws are incredibly social creatures. They just needed the right circumstances to show it. Behind her, Atlas himself lay stretched across the platform like an enormous, deadly house cat. His presence had initially terrified the examination committee, but after 6 months of working together, he had become a familiar sight around the xenobiology department. Several professors had taken to bringing him treats, though none would admit it publicly. Professor Vent, an insectoid academic known for her sharp questioning, clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. Your success with the Shadow Maw family is remarkable, but it raises larger questions about human methodology. This is the 7th documented case this year of human students forming bonds with creatures classified as extremely dangerous. The Void Whale Partnership, the Shadow Wolf Pack integration, the Crystal Spider colonies, the Phase Cats, the Storm Birds, and now this. Why do humans consistently attempt to befriend apex predators that should logically kill them? The auditorium fell silent. This was a question everyone wanted answered, but no one quite knew how to ask. Representatives from dozens of species waited to hear how a human would explain their seemingly suicidal tendency to approach the galaxy's most dangerous creatures with nothing but good intentions and snack food. Beth looked out at the sea of faces, alien and human alike, all waiting for some profound scientific explanation. She shrugged, scratching Atlas behind the ears as the massive creature purred loud enough to vibrate the lecture hall windows. Because usually they're not really trying to be monsters, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the sudden quiet. They're just scared, hungry, or protecting something they love. Same as anyone else, really. The simplicity of her answer seemed to stun the audience. In the back rows, alien students frankly took notes about humanological empathy patterns and interspecies emotional projection. The examination committee exchanged glances, trying to process how something so complex could have such a straightforward explanation. Professor Martinez cleared his throat. The committee will now deliberate. But everyone already knew the result. Beth's thesis had opened an entirely new field of study, human-first xenobiology. Her methods were being studied, copied, and adapted across the galaxy. As the crowd filed out of the lecture hall, Atlas stood and stretched, yawning to reveal teeth that could easily tear through starship hull plating. Then he followed Beth toward the exit. Just another day in what had become the new normal at the academy. Outside, 3 more Shadow Mall adolescents waited to walk their human friend back to her dormitory, because that's what family does.